We've been talking about A Good Marriage, directed by Eric Romer. And that's where we have to leave you for this programme. We will be back next week, but on behalf of all of us at Meridian, goodbye.
We are gaining people and losing people, and we're changing time zones all the time, and various of our frequencies are going off to carry Somali or Romanian or Hindi or something like that. And then they come back to us, and we have to remind people that they're tuned to the BBC broadcasting in English. In about 10 seconds, I shall be announcing a pre-recorded programme. So if you'll hang on, I'll just speak to the world.
That's the end of the news from London.
BBC World Service presents The World Today. Now, I noticed that went on at 9 minutes and 19 seconds. And if I can find my pencil, I've only just arrived, so I haven't got everything yet. That was 9:19. Now, what's coming on next is The Week in Wales. My next absolute...
Time to get up. Time to get up. It is a rule that we're not supposed to touch them.
Time to get up.
We're only supposed to shake the bedspread.
Thanks, yeah.
One man was very difficult. 4 men come over, he still wouldn't get up. The announcer came, he still wouldn't get up. Then the DO came down, and then he get up. 2.5 hours late.
Говорит Лондон. В эфире русская служба BBC. Доброе утро. В London'e 4 часа 45 minut.
Bağımsız Zimbabwe devletinin ilk hükümetini kurmaya çağırdı.
Katerega stranka je dobila 20 sedežev.
This is London.
Adieu, bonjour, bonjour, whatever it is, wherever you are. You learn little bits like that. If you go to the Arabic, it's halamakah, samadahak, which is Somali. In Latin American, Benito Comancheros, which means the old bandit. Italians, they say La Fuci Beneluti, which means man with a loud voice.
The hub of the external services is this rather ageing building, Bush House. And from here we broadcast in 37 different languages at a cost to the government of around £70 million a year. And for that money, this country gets a regular audience of over 100 million people. Because of cuts, we have declined in the league table in terms of the number of hours we broadcast. But I'm happy to say that we still remain first in the league in terms of the audience we get. We get the biggest audience of any international broadcaster in the world. I think many people overseas find it very difficult to understand that although the government pays us the money, they do not have the editorial control.
Because I think there are sometimes big problems for people coming here into the BBC, which is that we do have a different attitude, particularly to people like politicians or senior businessmen, you know, with loads of money and all the rest of it, which is that only in very exceptional circumstances, for instance, would we furnish people with a list of questions. I know certainly in some parts of the subcontinent, a minister would not agree to be interviewed unless he had a list of questions. But they are likely to, if not literally write out their answers, but have planned it out to such an extent that it's flat as a pancake, boring, and all you get is the official line. And on the whole, we are not after an official line.
Newsroom, Mrs. Reagan.
Mrs. Reagan. Mrs. Reagan! And Mr. Thatcher. Mrs. Thatcher up from Parliament on point 2, and Reagan's just about to have a news conference in Washington that's patched through onto newsroom point 7.
Perhaps the right honourable gentleman did hear our ambassador on the news.
The news conference is now scheduled for 20 minutes. The occasion is currently on ice as long as martial law lasts. So the only other thing...
Pretty extraordinary, Bob, isn't it?
I wouldn't know, honestly. They seem to think it's extraordinary here.
I say to the right... The Soviet Union's Warsaw Pact allies are speeding up modernisation of their armed forces.
We don't know who it was. We assumed it was Bush.
This is Mark Brain in Vienna.
Well, this is your first day in the newsroom, so it must be confusing for you. Now, this newsroom's just about unlike any other newsroom you've ever worked in before. We're on the air all day, 24 hours a day. Remember that today is today in Britain, and it's yesterday somewhere else, and it's tomorrow somewhere else, so we try and avoid today's, tomorroow's, and yesterday's. Our spring is someone else's autumn, our winter is someone else's summer.
A march to mark the anniversary of the death of Bobby Sam.
Any hope.
So what you've got to remember when you write is that you're not just writing for an English audience, you're also writing for an audience that may be listening with English as a second language, so it's difficult for them to understand. They may be listening under terrible conditions, i.e. shortwave, and reception might be poor. And also, every word you write is going to have to be translated. I couldn't begin to tell you the problems we have with translations. For example, if we spoke about a single-handed transatlantic yacht race, that has actually been translated as a one-armed transatlantic yacht race. My job is to decide what goes into these bulletins and how it's written. And what I personally try and do is sit myself up in the clouds and look at the world as a whole. Because I'm in London, because I'm British, I can't take sides. And you're the same when you're writing your story, you can't take sides. But always remember that one man's guerrilla is another man's freedom fighter. We've got several sources of information. Perhaps one of our major ones is our own monitoring unit at Caversham, set out in the countryside near Reading. Inside it's rather ancient, with some rather ancient equipment, although they are trying to update it. The Russians are very suspicious of it. I think they think we use it for spying. But what in fact it does is 24 hours a day, it monitors foreign radio stations, decides what the most interesting things that are being said on them are, and feeds it back to us.
Moscow World Service in English.
And they will have a polling station among the nominees.
Then we have Tehran in Persian. And Madrid in Spanish.
Ratificación en medios norteamericanos se dijo entonces que el ingreso de España reforzaba la OTAN materia.
Baghdad in Arabic. Ankara in Turkish. And Radio South Africa. There are clues. For instance, just say Hungarian. When they want to say in a country or in a town, they say London, Bonn. Right? So if it's a news bulletin, they're obviously talking about places, and it's got to be happening somewhere. It's in somewhere. So you hear a town or a country in Bonn after it, you know this is likely to be Hungarian. And then something like Indonesian, which most people won't recognize, but they have no plurals. If they want to say dogs, they don't say dogs, they say dog, dog. So if you listen to the language, although you don't understand a single word of it, if you hear double words often, they are plurals in Indonesian.
From where it's situated, of course, Caversham can pick up a lot of the world, but some countries, their radio station signals are so weak that we have to have outlying stations dotted around the world. And one of the major ones is just outside Nairobi, and from there they monitor most of the East African radio stations.
During the Uganda trouble some years ago, we were monitoring here, and I had a piece put on my desk which subbed. It was what we call a Z item, it's a flash item. sent back to UK and broadcast back to us within 10 minutes. We don't normally worry about the reaction of any foreign governments. We're particularly anxious not to upset our host government, Kenya, and we never have done. That is to say, the monitoring service has never done so. Sometimes television made a blasted nuisance of itself by such as Lord Chalfont, who produced a terrible television film which slanged the Kenya hierarchy, which didn't go down at all well. We nearly got thrown out as a result of it. At the moment, things are fairly quiet, but we have every expectation of it blowing up again very soon. Siad Barre in Somalia, I think, is walking a tightrope. Mengistu, he's certainly liable to get a bullet in him at any moment. Obote, I think he's probably on his way out, so there are skids under him. At the moment, things are very quiet indeed, but this could change overnight.
12 hours, Greenwich Mean Time.
BBC World Service presents Radio Newsreel.
One of our other major sources of information, of course, is our own correspondents who are dotted throughout the world. These chaps work for both domestic radio, domestic television and ourselves. We have them in most major capitals. People like Mark Tully in India, for instance.
For bulletins and reels. Mark Tully.
The dispatch for the... It's a strange feeling, really. You're writing for two audiences. You know you're writing for a world audience, but you also know that you're writing for a very attentive local audience. Quite often it's funny, you know, you get crises in India and foreign correspondents flock in from all around the world, and they go to the villages, and the villagers say, "Are you from the BBC? Are you Mark Tully?" And they say, "No, we're from the Washington Post, or we're from the Voice of America." They say, "Oh, well, we want to talk to the BBC. Why hasn't the BBC come to talk to us?" I remember particularly once when a new government was formed in India after a long-lasting political crisis. And I went round to see the new Prime Minister. And as I entered the sort of courtyard of his house, I was surrounded by great, tough, burly farmers, supporters of his from northern India, just up the road here. And they said to me, "You're Mark Tully, aren't you?" Now, I don't know how they recognised me, but they seemed to do so. And they said that you said that Mr. Jagjeevan Ram, who's our man's opponent, was going to win the contest. And he didn't, did he? And I literally had to be rescued by some of the politer and more gentle supporters of the victor, Mr. Charan Singh, and taken to see him. Because what the BBC says in India and in Indian villages does matter an awful lot.
Since the new advisory body was thought specifically to have been created to accommodate Ye and some other veterans of the party, the fact that they are conspicuously absent from it appears to upset a great deal of the conventional wisdom. Stephen Jessel, BBC, P. King. 3 spellings for you: Ye Jen Ying, Y Yellow, E Edward, J Jeremy.
Life here is very frustrating professionally because we simply don't have the access to the news. You cannot pick up a phone and ring somebody. I mean, once somebody phoned me up from London and said, "Will you ring up Deng Xiaoping's press officer and see whether he's in good health?" That, in the context of China, is a question so meaningless as to be ridiculous. Deng Xiaoping's health is a closely guarded secret. He doesn't have a press officer, and if he did, I wouldn't have his telephone number. There are Chinese who are authorized to deal with foreigners, and one talks with them, and one tries to find out about their daily lives. Because most journalists here, I think, although we do the political stuff, we're much more interested in the way the Chinese live, what their hopes and aspirations are, you know, whether they enjoy life. After all, here we are living in a country of 1,000 million people, and who do we see? I mean, a few dozen Chinese and other foreigners. And it's a ludicrous paradox, because people back home are much more interested in how do the Chinese live than they are in who has replaced who on the Politburo. It can get very lonely here. I remember during the Falklands crisis, when that dominated radio and television in Britain for 2-3 months, however long it was. I felt here in China, when actually nothing very much was happening, like one of those Japanese soldiers who's not been told the Second World War is over. I mean, you're sitting there, but nobody knows or cares whether you're there. And you have to get out of China fairly regularly to keep your sanity, I think.